Imagine for a second that you have $1.5 million. That's a lot of scratch. With that kind of money, you could buy a literal castle in Normandy, France. I'm talking 12 bedrooms, a moat, maybe even a ghost named Pierre who judges your wine choices. Now take that same $1.5 million and fly over to Toronto or Vancouver. What does it get you? A semi-detached teardown that smells like wet dog and has a basement ceiling so low you have to walk like a hunchback. Welcome to Canada, the land of maple syrup, polite apologies, and a housing market that has essentially turned into a financial black hole, sucking the life out of every other sector of the economy. You see, while the rest of the world was busy innovating, building tech giants, or manufacturing things people actually use, Canada decided to go all in on one thing: selling houses to each other for more and more money. It sounds funny until you look at the math, then it's just a horror story. In this video, we are going to dissect how real estate didn't just grow in Canada, it swallowed the entire economy whole. We're going to look at the zombie productivity numbers, the shady world of shadow banking, the moral hazard of government bailouts, and the scary reality of what happens when a country mistakes debt for wealth. Buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride. 1. The great capital suck. Or, why we don't make things anymore. Let's start with a little story. Imagine you're a brilliant young entrepreneur named Kevin. You've got an idea for a new AI startup that could revolutionize logistics. You need capital. You go to a bank in downtown Toronto wearing your best suit, pitch deck in hand. The loan officer looks at you, sighs, and says, "Kevin, this looks risky. Business is hard. We can't give you $500,000 for this." Disheartened, you walk out. But then you have an idea. You walk back in 5 minutes later and say, "Actually, I want to buy a one-bedroom condo that was built 40 years ago and has questionable plumbing." The loan officer's eyes light up. "Why didn't you say so? Here's $1 million. Have fun." This is the great capital suck. Economies grow when capital, money, flows into productive assets. Factories, software, machinery, research and development. These things create jobs and exportable goods, but in Canada, an obscene amount of available capital has been diverted away from productivity and into residential real estate. Let's look at the stats because numbers don't lie, even if realtors do. According to data from the OECD, Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, Canada is projected to be the worst performing advanced economy over the next decade. Not one of the worst. Why? Because our business investment is in the toilet. While American investors were pouring money into Nvidia, Tesla and Microsoft, Canadian investors were dumping money into pre-construction condos in the suburbs. In Q4 of 2023, investment in residential structures was nearly double the investment in non-residential structures and machinery combined in some metrics. Think about the insanity of that. We spend more money building boxes to sleep in than we do on the tools and businesses that allow us to afford those boxes. It's created a feedback loop of doom. Because housing, returns have been so high, historically speaking. Smart money stopped chasing innovation. Why risk investing in a startup that might fail when you can buy a townhouse in Mississauga, sit on it for 3 years, do absolutely nothing, and sell it for a 40% profit? It's logical behavior for the individual, but it's suicide for the nation. We have effectively turned the entire country into a giant landlord. And here is the dark punchline. Landlording is not productivity. Rent-seeking does not add value to the world, it just extracts it. When a house doubles in price, it doesn't become twice as useful. It's the same house. The shelter it provides hasn't changed, but the capital required to secure it has doubled, draining that money away from the rest of the economy. So when you wonder why Canadian salaries are stagnant while American salaries are zooming past us, this is why. A country cannot get rich by selling the same houses back and forth to each other at higher prices. That's not an economy. That's a Ponzi scheme with a flag. And the worst part? We are now too big to fail. Real estate and its related industries, finance, insurance, construction, make up such a massive chunk of Canada's GDP, hovering around 20-25% or more depending on how you measure it, that if housing corrects, the entire Canadian economy ceases to exist. We are holding a tiger by the tail, and we are terrified to let go. 2. The HELOC heroine, addicted to free money. If Section 1 was about the banks, Section 2 is about you. Well, maybe not you specifically, but the collective you of the Canadian homeowner. Let's play a game called The Wealth Illusion. Meet Linda and Bob. It's 2015. They bought a house in the suburbs for $500,000. It was a stretch, but they made it work. Fast forward to 2021. That same house is now appraised at $1.2 million. Linda and Bob feel like absolute geniuses. They made $700,000 without lifting a finger. They are rich! But wait, are they? Can they spend that house? Can they eat the drywall? No, unless they sell the house and move to a yurt in Saskatchewan. That money is imaginary. Enter the drug dealer of the Canadian economy, the HELOC, home equity line of credit. The bank calls Linda and Bob and says, "Hey, you have $700,000 of equity sitting there doing nothing. Why don't you unlock it?" So Linda and Bob take out a HELOC. It feels like free money. They use it to buy a new Ford F-150, the official truck of "I'm financing my lifestyle with debt," renovate the kitchen, with quartz countertops obviously, and, here is the kicker, maybe even put a down payment on an investment condo. This is the HELOC heroin. It fueled a massive consumption boom in Canada that masked the fact that our actual wages weren't growing. We felt rich because our houses were inflating, so we borrowed against them to buy stuff. At the peak of the mania, Canadians became some of the most indebted people on the face of the planet. We beat the Americans in household debt to income, which is a contest you do not want to win. For every dollar of disposable income the average Canadian household had, they owed roughly $1.80 to $1.85 in debt. Compare that to the US, where consumers actually deleveraged after the 2008 crash. Canadians looked at 2008 and said, "Hold my beer." But here is where the story gets dark. HELOCs are usually variable rate loans. When interest rates were at 0.25%, this was a party. It was practically free to borrow $100,000. But when the Bank of Canada started hiking rates in 2022 and 2023 to fight inflation, the hangover hit. Suddenly, Linda and Bob's monthly interest payments tripled. That free money they spent on the truck and the Reno, now it's costing them thousands a month just to service the debt. And this exposes the terrifying fragility of the Canadian economy. Consumption drives GDP, but if everyone's disposable income is being devoured by servicing debt on their overpriced homes, nobody buys anything else. Restaurants empty out, retailers close, small businesses die. We created a wealth effect on the way up, where rising home prices made people spend more. Now, we're staring down the barrel of a poverty effect on the way down. Even scarier is the phenomenon of negative amortization. This is a fancy banking term that essentially means you are so broke, your monthly payment doesn't even cover the interest you owe. In 2023 and 2024, major Canadian banks revealed that a shocking percentage of their mortgage portfolio had amortization periods extending beyond 35, 40, even 70 years. Let that sink in. 70 years. That means you will be dead, your children will be old, and that mortgage will still be there. We essentially invented intergenerational debt serfdom, just to keep the illusion alive that housing prices never go down. The banks allowed borrowers to pay a fixed amount even as rates rose, adding the unpaid interest onto the principal. The debt pile grew while they were paying it. It's a zombie mortgage for a zombie economy. We are walking on a razor's edge, folks, and the wind is starting to blow. 3. The population trap, the fake growth strategy. If you read the headlines, politicians will tell you the Canadian economy is growing. Look at the GDP, they say. It's going up. We are winning. But if the economy is growing, why does everyone feel broke? Why does the average Canadian feel like they are slowly drowning in a pool of maple syrup and debt? It's because of a little economic sleight of hand I like to call the pizza party deception. Imagine you throw a pizza party for 10 people. You order 12 pizzas. Everyone eats well. Life is good. Now imagine you invite 10 more people to the party, but you only order one extra pizza. Technically, the total amount of pizza at the party went up, GDP growth, but the amount of pizza per person crashed. GDP per capita decline. This is exactly what has happened to Canada. We've been masking our rot with massive population growth. In 2023 alone, Canada's population grew by over 1.2 million people. That is roughly the population of Estonia arriving in 12 months. It was the fastest growth rate since the 1950s. Now, immigration is great. It brings talent, culture, and awesome food. But you cannot invite 1 million people to dinner if you haven't set the table. We didn't build the houses for them. We didn't build the hospitals. We didn't build the transit. We just opened the doors and said, Good luck finding a basement apartment for under $2,500. This created what economists at the National Bank of Canada and CIBC frankly called a population trap. Here is the dirty secret. When you flood the labour market with people, wages stay suppressed. Why would a corporation invest in expensive automation or productivity software, which boosts the economy long term, when they can just hire cheap labour? They wouldn't, and they didn't. So, while the US was automating and getting more efficient, Canada became less efficient. We used warm bodies to prop up our GDP numbers. If you look at GDP per capita, which is a fancy way of measuring your actual standard of living, Canada has been in a recession for a while now. We are getting poorer individually, even if the country is getting richer collectively. And where do all these new people go? Into the housing meat grinder. High demand plus zero supply, skyrocketing rents. This benefits existing asset holders, landlords and boomers, and crushes newcomers and young Canadians. It is a wealth transfer from the desperate to the comfortable, disguised as economic policy. 4. The too big to fail gamble. Government moral hazard. By now you might be asking, why doesn't the market just correct? If houses are too expensive, shouldn't prices fall until people can buy them? Oh, my sweet summer child. You're assuming we live in a free market. We do not. We live in a protected asset class. The Canadian government, regardless of which party is in charge, is terrified of home prices falling. Why? Because homeowner voters are the most powerful demographic in the country. If home prices drop 20%, the government gets voted out. It's that simple. So, they have created a massive web of moral hazard. Moral hazard is what happens when you take risks because you know someone else will pay the bill if things go south. Look at the CMHC, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. This is a government crown corporation that insures mortgages. If you buy a house with less than 20% down, you must pay for this insurance. But here is the kicker. The insurance protects the bank, not you. If you default, the bank gets paid back in full by the insurance. The bank takes almost zero risk. They hand out $500,000, and if you can't pay, the taxpayer, via the CMHC, makes them whole. Does that sound like a system that encourages responsible lending? Or does that sound like a system that encourages banks to shovel money out the door as fast as possible? And when the market started wobbling in 2023 and 2024, the government panicked. They extended amortization periods. They bought up billions in Canada mortgage bonds to inject liquidity into the system. They floated the idea of 30-year mortgages for first-time buyers. Every time the housing market tries to take a natural breath and correct itself, the government sprints in with a defibrillator and screams, "Not on my watch." They are essentially trying to outlaw a recession. But the problem with trying to ban gravity is that eventually you run out of energy, and the fall is much, much harder. By refusing to let the forest burn a little bit, they have piled up so much dry wood that the eventual fire threatens to burn down the whole country. Hey, quick pause. I'm currently living in this fort because rent in Toronto is $2,800 a month, and my landlord says this living room is a luxury open-concept micro-suite. If you're enjoying this deep dive into why we're all broke, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow, and maybe one day I can afford a fort made of actual drywall. Also, drop a comment below. What is the craziest housing price you've seen in your city? I saw a parking spot sell for $100,000 last week. Beat that. Okay, back to the doom. 5. The caste system. Owners versus renters. We need to talk about the social fabric of Canada because it is ripping apart. For decades, the Canadian deal was simple. Work hard, save money, buy a house, retire. That deal is dead. We've replaced it with a rigid feudal caste system. Class A, the landed gentry. These are people who bought real estate before 2015. They aren't necessarily smarter or harder working than anyone else. They were just born earlier. They are sitting on millions in tax-free capital gains. They leverage their equity to buy rental properties, effectively taxing the income of Class B. Class B, the serfs, renters. These are young people, newcomers, and anyone who missed the boat. They pay 50% to 60% of their income to Class A just to have a roof over their heads. Because rents are so high, they cannot save for a down payment. The ladder has been pulled up. This isn't just about money, it's about life. When housing costs absorb all your income, you delay marriage. You delay having kids. Canada's fertility rate hit an all-time low of 1.26 children per woman in 2023. We are literally dying out because we cannot afford to reproduce. Think about the psychological toll. You have 30-year-old professionals, lawyers, engineers, teachers, living with 3 roommates or moving back in with their parents. It creates a state of arrested development. You can't feel like an adult when you're asking your mum for permission to bring a date over at age 32. This inequality breeds resentment. You walk down the street and see a boomer in a Porsche bought with a HELOC, driving past a tent encampment in the park. The disconnect is visceral, and the worst part. The system is designed to protect the gentry at the expense of the serfs. Every policy that helps affordability usually just adds demand, which raises prices, which helps owners. First Home Savings Account raises demand. RRSP Home Buyers Plan raises demand. Lower interest rates raises demand. We are cannibalizing the future of the young to preserve the wealth of the old. And history tells us that when a society creates a permanent underclass with no hope of ownership, things get volatile. 6. The laundromat, snow washing. If you thought the only people buying Canadian real estate were hardworking families and hopeful immigrants, I have a bridge, or rather a condo in Vancouver to sell you. We have to talk about the dirty underbelly of this boom. Money laundering. In international criminal circles, Canada has a cute nickname. They call it snow washing. It sounds refreshing, doesn't it? Like a mountain breeze. But what it actually means is taking dirty money from drug cartels, corrupt officials, and international fraudsters and scrubbing it clean by buying Canadian real estate. For years, Canada had some of the weakest transparency laws in the G7. You could buy a $20 million penthouse in Vancouver through a numbered company, owned by a shell company in the Seychelles, owned by a trust in the British Virgin Islands. Nobody knew who actually owned the property. The Vancouver model became world famous. Here's how it worked. 1. Gangsters walk into a BC casino with literal hockey bags full of $20 bills. 2. They buy chips, they gamble a bit, they cash out. 3. Now they have a casino win check. The money is clean. 4. They take that check and buy a house. 5. The house sits empty, appreciating in value by 15% a year. It was the perfect crime. And the government turned a blind eye for years because, hey, it boosted GDP. Who cares if the money comes from fentanyl sales if it helps balance the provincial budget? A report by the expert panel on money laundering in BC estimated that in 1 year alone, $7.4 billion was laundered through British Columbia, with $5 billion of that going directly into real estate. That's enough to distort the entire market. When you are bidding on a house, you aren't just competing against Linda and Bob. You are competing against the Sinaloa cartel. And guess what? The cartel has more cash than you. They don't care if they overpay by $100,000. They just need to park the cash. This drives up prices for everyone else. We effectively sold our sovereignty to the highest bidder, turning our cities into safety deposit boxes for the global elite, while our own citizens live in basement suites. 7. The great brain drain, exodus of the competent. So we've established that housing is expensive, wages are low, and criminals are your neighbours. What happens next? The smart people leave. This is the silent killer of the Canadian economy. We talk a lot about immigration, people coming in, but we rarely talk about the emigration of our best and brightest. If you're a 25-year-old software engineer graduating from the University of Waterloo, one of the best tech schools in the world, you have a choice. Option A, move to Toronto, earn $85,000 KD, pay $3,000 for a shoebox apartment, save nothing. Free healthcare if you can find a doctor, which you can't. Option B, move to Austin, Texas or Seattle, earn $140,000 USD, which is like $190,000 CAD. Buy a massive house for half the price of the Toronto shoebox. Pay for health insurance but actually get to see a doctor. It's not a hard choice. Data from recent years shows a surging number of Canadians moving to the US. We are subsidizing their education, training them up, and then gifting them to the American economy because we cannot offer them a life worth living. This creates a productivity death spiral. The people who build companies, invent patents, and create high-value jobs are leaving. The people staying are those who are anchored by real estate or those who can't leave. We are hollowing out our middle class. A country cannot survive on baristas and real estate agents alone. You need engineers, doctors, and entrepreneurs. But why would a doctor stay in Canada when the housing market eats 60% of their take-home pay? We are becoming a nursery and a nursing home. We raise the young, they leave to work during their productive years, and maybe they come back when they're old to use the healthcare system. That is a recipe for national bankruptcy. 8. The end game. Japan 2.0 or worse. So, how does this movie end? Spoiler alert, it's not a rom-com. Economists generally see two scenarios for Canada, and neither is particularly fun. Scenario A, the big crash. This is the 2008 American style. The bubble bursts, prices plummet 30-50%. The good, housing becomes affordable again for the young. The bad, the banking system collapses, millions lose their jobs, the dollar tanks. It's anarchy for 2-3 years. But remember Section 4? The government will do anything to prevent this. They will print money, extend amortizations to 100 years, and bail out everyone. Which brings us to Scenario B, the stagnation, Japanification. This is the more likely, and arguably more painful, outcome. In the 1990s, Japan's real estate bubble burst, but instead of letting it clear, they kept zombie companies alive with cheap debt. The result? The lost decades. 30 years of zero growth. Wages flatlined. The stock market did nothing. A slow, grinding decline in the standard of living. Canada is staring down the barrel of this. We might not see a spectacular crash. Instead, we might see nominal prices stay high, while inflation eats away at our purchasing power. We will become a low-growth, high-cost museum of a country. A place where the rich own everything, the poor serve them, and the ambitious leave. We're trading our future dynamism for current stability. We're choosing to be comfortable today at the cost of being destitute tomorrow. The real estate trap isn't just about house prices. It's about the allocation of human energy. When an entire generation spends their mental energy worrying about rent, mortgage rates, and housing scarcity, they aren't thinking about art, science, business, or community. We have trapped our collective potential inside 4 walls of drywall. Final thoughts, breaking the spell. So, is it hopeless? Should you just pack your bags and move to a hut in Bali? Not necessarily, but we need to wake up. The first step to fixing a problem is admitting you have one. Canada is an addict. We're addicted to high home prices. We treat houses like Bitcoin with a bathroom. To fix this, we need a cultural shift. We need to stop celebrating when house prices go up. High housing prices are not wealth creation. They are inflation. They are a failure of policy. We need to demand our politicians stop protecting the banks and start protecting the productive economy. We need to tax land speculation and incentivize business investment. We need to build, but we also need to pop the balloon of demand. If you are young, don't let the FOMO, fear of missing out, ruin your life. Don't take out a mortgage that will strangle you for 40 years just because society says you should. Renting is not a failure. Investing in yourself, your skills and your freedom is often a better return than a condo in the suburbs. And if you are a homeowner sitting on millions in equity, understand that your paper wealth is coming at the cost of your children's future. The ladder you climbed up is the same one you are kicking down. This country has everything it needs to be an economic superpower. Resources, peace, educated people, but we locked it all up in a mortgage. It's time to find the key. Thanks for watching. This was a heavy one, I know, but if we don't talk about the ugly truth, we can't fix it. If you found this valuable, please like and subscribe. It helps me afford the rent on my cushion fort, and check out this other video on our channel, where I break down exactly how Poland beat the West. Stay safe, stay solvent, and I'll see you in the next one.